Hi, it's Chris Reeve here, the head of comms and business development, and welcome to the third episode of Culture Crowd. Thank you so much for joining us. It brings me fantastic pleasure today to introduce you to someone who I greatly admire, who's of course Steve Balmer-Waters from 8RC Consulting, specializing in all sorts of consulting, not just retail, and is an absolute superstar. So without further ado, Steve, would you mind firstly just introducing yourself and how you help people, first of all, please?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I want to just say hi, and I'm so chuffed to be here. So thank you. So Steve Balmer-Waters, who is he and what's he all about? Our business really focuses on 8 pillars. I believe personally that any business can run well if it's dealt with in sizable chunks. The 8 pillars allows a business to reduce its chunks down, deal with each chunk individually, and that way look to do a profit. How it kind of works is you manage the 7 pillars very, very well, and the 8th pillar, which is profit, is a byproduct of the 7 pillars done well. It's something that I hold very close to my heart. It's something that I've worked on for the last 20 years plus, and I strongly believe that any business owner or individual, if they look at their business in these smaller chunks, it's just much more easier to digest.
Steve, give us a little bit about your background, because you've got a really fascinating background, haven't you?
I have. I'm very lucky. My sort of career started in the mid-80s, and I worked for a company called British Shoe Corporation for 12 years. And within that 12-year period, I was promoted every 18 months to 2 years, which is very fortunate. So I got to travel the breadth of the UK in retail, footwear, and then sort of moved on into clothing, moved on into toys, accessories, and then spent a bit of time in the UK as well as the US with an extreme sports company. So a bit of a checkered kind of career, but always centered around people and the consumer. I also spent a bit of time in the Middle East, a bit of time in Africa, also working with some of the big Middle Eastern family retail empires out there as well. And then later on in my career, I decided to sort of use that experience and go it alone for a little while, which was great, doing the consulting. And then one day I got a knock at the door, and it was the opportunity to move to Norfolk, beautiful, sunny Norfolk.
Brilliant.
And that was in 2013. And I got the opportunity to work for what I believe is an amazing brand, a real community brand, and a brand that I really hold close to my heart. And that's Norwich City Football Club. And I call it a brand. Yay, 100%. And I call it a brand, not just a football club, because I think it's bigger than that. It's at the heart of the community. It's a brand which, when you see that badge, you can trust it, you feel calm, you feel great. And one of the things that's really touched my heart about Norfolk in general is just the family connection, really. And I spent 4 amazing years there before I started 8RC. And if it wasn't for Norwich City Football Club, then 8RC wouldn't really exist. It's really been built on the confidence and just the power that I've seen through supporters, fans and customers, that if you give them what they want and you treat them in the right way, amazing things can happen. And that's what really 8RC is all about.
Steve, I'm so pleased that we covered that, because I really want to delve deeper into, because of course this whole series is about company culture, and you've been all over the world. To mine out all of that knowledge from you is going to be absolutely fascinating. There's one thing that the main reason why I wanted to get you on this show, Steve, to be totally transparent with you, was one pillar specifically, which is people, customer needs, and empowering teams. Why is that such a crucial pillar in business for you?
Well, if you think about business and you sort of think about it in a step process, business is actually quite easy. The variable, the thing that you cannot always gauge, is the customer and the people that work for you. So when we talk about people, we're really talking about the two prongs, really. One is your client or your customer, and one is your in-house team, the people that you rely on to deliver. Why people are so crucial is, if you get it wrong, your business can fail. If you get it right, your business can be very successful. What's complicated about it is you've got to get into the hearts and minds of a person to really understand them in order to get the best out of them. I use this thing around culture, and I do believe that word culture is used quite too often in this day and age. And actually, people don't really understand what we really mean when we talk about culture. Culture is about a way of life. Culture is about the language that you use. Culture is about body language, eye contact. Culture is about the way you treat your fellow person on a day-to-day basis. And culture is really about you, the person, bringing who you are yes, you can shape it into a business environment, but it's about bringing you, because by bringing you, the culture can be galvanized and can be more successful.
Steve, how do you go about starting an exceptional company culture in your opinion? Because there must be so much that you can just think of just off the hat right now, but how would you start? If you're a managing director and you had a business that was struggling a little bit, let's be honest, but perhaps your good staff are leaving and you're thinking, God, how do I build a company culture? How would you get it going?
I think the very early stages of any business, you think about the values. So you think about, why am I here and what is this business all about? It's really important that you think about those and you document those and get them right in the first place. So the values are absolutely critical. The second part of that for me, and it's something that we kind of shy away from, it's about personality, and it's about understanding who you are as a person and who do you work best with based on your personality traits. If you can build a culture around personality traits, you win every day of the week. And I'll give you an example. If your business needs energy and enthusiasm, would you go and recruit someone that doesn't have energy and enthusiasm? You wouldn't. Why? Because you need the energy and enthusiasm for your business to be successful. So personality traits are absolutely critical. If you're a business and you need people to be caring, you need people to really be more methodical in their approach, then actually those personality traits are crucial for that business. So for me, it's about the values, and then it's about the personality traits that you believe you really need in an organization to make it work. And you have to really spend a lot of time on this and get it right, because if you get it wrong, I've seen some very, very talented people in my time do a very, very bad job. And it's not because they're not talented, it's because their personality trait just wasn't right for the organization and business.
One of the things that I would say from that, Steve, which is super interesting, you hit around the stigma around culture. People think, oh, culture, but it is so important. And my observations are, people are doing a lot of talking. They're ticking a lot of corporate boxes, but they're not necessarily listening, truly listening. They're not asking their staff how they feel. They're not truly listening to their staff. Team, actually, I don't even like the word staff, to be honest with you. I think team is a really important word to use that we neglect quite a lot. And another thing that's super fascinating for me to understand, Steve, is once you've got this going, so you've got the ship going and it's sailing and it's all very great and it's good, but how do you maintain it over time? Because naturally, there's so many challenges in business nowadays. In the modern world, there's so many opportunities, but also so many challenges. When that's tested, how do you maintain that company culture? Because you speak of values, and again, to go off on a bit of a rant myself, people, they create these our 5 values and they might plaster them on the wall and they might look at them every I don't know, once a year maybe at the Christmas party and laugh at how that, oh yeah, you didn't do that one, or you didn't do that one. But truly, how do you implement values and how do you maintain values over a period of time?
Let's not sugarcoat it, okay? The reality is a lot of CEOs, a lot of directors, a lot of management teams that I've come into contact with over the years, and ones that I see all the time, say, yeah, we've got a fantastic culture and really invest in our people. But do they? No, they don't. Because what actually happens is certain things get in the way of that, whether that's cash constraints, whether that's around vision, whether that's around time. Now, the biggest issue, I think, is time. You can't quick win this. You have to invest in it. You have to take your time. So, for instance, do you know your employee Rita? Do you know what she does in her spare time? Do you know what pets she's got? Do you know her auntie, uncle, and grandma? Do you know what really makes her tick? Do you know those things? CEOs out there, if you don't know the answer to these questions, then you are failing miserably in building a culture. It just won't happen, because guess what? You've got to give a bit of yourself. You've also got to tell people about you as an individual. You've got to give them some information about who you are, how you turn up, what's your purpose. And then through that, people then start to open up and talk more. And you're absolutely right, Chris. So many people say, put these wonderful charts on the wall, put these great words, but actually it means nothing if you don't believe in it. It means nothing if it isn't part of your everyday routine. It doesn't mean anything if once in a blue moon you say good morning. You have to say good morning every single morning. You have to make eye contact every morning. You've got to feel that you want to make a cup of tea and a cup of coffee every morning. Not just the mornings that it suits you. You've got to have it every morning. If that's your culture, then that's what needs to happen. And I think, for me, maintaining the culture is about investment. It's investment of time. And time is very precious. But it's the one thing that I think you have to give up. is the time to make a culture work.
Slide plug there. Then, if you want to save time, you could just use the one question and ask your employees how they feel at a click of a button. Of course, not escaping those personalised conversations. Steve, you've mentioned there board. We're getting to that C-suite sort of zone now in the conversation. What sort of challenges have you seen, for example, the back end of last year, early this year, that C-suites are facing in terms of company culture? What sort of challenges have they been hit with, and how have you helped potentially solve those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the challenges I touched on earlier is around time. So it's this investment in time. If you get an A4 sheet of paper and you start to write down how much time you physically spend on a weekly basis with your people as a CEO, I think you'd be shocked. And I think you'd actually start to question yourself around, do I actually know my people and do I actually spend enough time? I think time is the thing that really hurts a lot of management teams and a lot of board. The second thing is, be honest with yourself about who you are, who you want to be, and who you want your team to be. Because the reality is, by going around the houses and not being direct and not being open and honest, actually what you're doing is you're doing a disjustice to your workforce. I use the phrase, you've got to work things from the bottom down rather than from the top down rather than the bottom up. So many businesses constantly pressure an organization from the top downwards, but not really understanding some of the issues that may lie underneath. You've got to have this two-way conveyor belt that goes up and down with communication, with tone of voice, with language, with all of that. And I think, again, it's about investing in that. I've previously worked with a client, I won't mention any names, and they've really embraced this whole thing around culture in such a positive way, to the point where it's really made them question how they turn up and what their purposes are as an individual. And that's had a massive effect on the workforce, because the workforce has started to see them slightly differently and starts to humanize everything. I think that's the word I want to use today, is humanize. We've got to humanize things so that people don't feel scared. One of the greatest things I hear a CEO or MD say is, I have an open door policy. Any MD or CEO that uses that word, can you just throw it in the bin right now? Because the fact that you're saying it means you haven't got an open door policy, because you shouldn't need to say it. Your door is open anyway. It should just happen. And more importantly, you've got to create an environment where people feel comfortable walking through that door and talking to you. I think that's sometimes where the challenge is, where people see the us and them in a business. And once that's sort of created, it's very, very hard to break down those barriers. And I applaud any senior managers to try and break down those barriers so that people do feel like they can come and talk. But you've got to create an environment for that to happen. It doesn't just happen overnight.
What is an environment that can make that happen, Steve, in your opinion?
I think it's an environment which, I'm going to use the word, which is very calm, an environment where there's no boundaries. When I say boundaries, I'm talking about obstacles sometimes, whether that's furniture, whether that's layout of office, whether that's where the lighting's coming in through the window, whether that's the use of plants. I think there's so much more to this, Chris, around creating an environment that's conducive to openness and for people to really work together. I'll give you an example, and I'm sure Norwich City Football Club won't mind me using this example. When I first got to Norwich, we had an environment where there's lots of individual offices around the building where people kind of tucked away, and certain teams couldn't converse and mix together and share ideas and communicate because of that. Once we sort of opened up the office and had an open office environment where people kind of worked closer together, people kind of communicated better, people were aware of what other people were doing, so had a little bit more sort of compassion for what people were doing. It really changed the culture. Imagine a football team on a pitch where each player was zoned off and couldn't see the next player, wouldn't make for a very good team performance. And actually the culture would be very difficult as well. Why do we go to stadiums where supporters are very, very close to the pitch, and we say those stadiums have a better atmosphere? It's because the culture's better, because actually you're there, you're close, you're up nice and close to the action that's going on. You feel like you're part of the activity that's going on there. And it's no different in the workplace. The more you lock yourself away and the more distance you have from your workforce, the harder it is to build a culture that's free-flowing, that's calm and understanding.
Cool. That was a whopper of an answer, Steve. Look, if you are only allowed to give just 2 tips, just 2 pieces of advice to senior management, managing directors, people within HR, the HR world, full stop, HR professionals, 2 tips to help them with culture, what would they be?
First tip would be to document the number of minutes per day that you spend with your team.
Okay.
Number one, okay? The second tip I would give would be to ask every single employee in your organization these few little words. How do you feel? Just those words. Open the gate, open it. Open the floodgates, take the information, and then you'll have the information to start to do something about things.
Steve, you can come on more often, because that is just absolutely totally in line with the one question beliefs, which is, of course, how do you feel about? So that is absolutely brilliant. I love the fact you brought that up. We're going to have to do a round 2 sometime, Steve, for sure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking up your time. I know you're a busy man, and I really appreciate sharing your knowledge and wisdom with our audience. I'm sure that they've enjoyed it. And please, if you have enjoyed it, if you're watching right now, do leave a comment down below, like, subscribe, all that social media stuff. That'd be absolutely fantastic. If you're watching or listening right now and actually you'd like to come on Culture Crowd because you've got an opinion on culture, feel free to reach out to myself. I'm Chris at theonequestion.com. Apart from that, thanks very much and have a great day.